have some different things planned for today. Obviously, I don't have a dress shirt or a tie on, so I'm not going to be preaching the whole service. And that's kind of how I gauge how dressy I get on a Sunday morning, but not necessarily the best approach. But anyways, we are going to be hearing from really two different groups this morning. And I'm really excited about this. And really, if we were to frame our service and what this is going to look like, we want to talk about how God has enabled our church family to serve over the last, really starting about 5 months ago. And there's been a lot of different things that God's given us opportunity to do, but really two different groups that we've been able to have a part in. Just this last week, me and Rachel Newby and 8 students, we went up to Camp Tadmore and we served up at Camp Tadmore for the week. And we were called, it's called a SAW team, which is Servants at Work. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a sec. But that was one opportunity as a group we had to serve. Starting back in March, you guys remember Chris and Karen Cornwell, they went to Zambia. And they were there for about 2 months. And we're going to have opportunity to hear from them. And many of you prayed for them. Many of you contributed towards them being able to go. And so we just want to hear it. What was that experience like? How did God use you? What did that look like? All of these things, though, were opportunities we had as a church family to serve, to be a blessing, to be about what God wants us to be about. And we've talked as a church prior to our Psalm series about being on mission. And I think both of these are examples of, as a church family, being on mission. So this morning, we're going to talk briefly, though, again, about our experience as a SAW team. So I'm going to invite all of our students who went on that, who are here this morning, go and come up to the platform here. We're going to have you answer a few questions. Most of them are familiar with this. They know this is not a surprise, so come on up. But again, we're excited for this. Like I said, just to give you a brief rundown before I let them kind of share their experience, we left on Sunday. Right after our kind of Sunday morning classes, we drove up to Tadmore and got there about 1:30, and we're there jumped right into it. And then we got back to church here on Friday at about 1 o'clock. And so, real quick rundown, what we did during the week. There's a SWAT team, different than the SAW team. SWAT stands for Summer Workers at Tadmore. And the SWAT team is also high schoolers. They are responsible for doing the dishes. They're responsible for cleaning bathrooms, responsible for doing different work projects in the afternoon. And so our team really blended with the SWAT team throughout the whole week. And so we got to know them, and as a result, we got to work in the kitchen. We got to clean bathrooms. We got to do a variety of other projects in the afternoon, and all of which helped contribute towards the camp going smoothly, allowing campers really to enjoy their time and to hear the gospel. And so that was really the purpose of that. And I was very, very proud of our team. We didn't all work together throughout the whole week. We were, like I said, split up into different groups and were able to do different things. But one of our groups that worked in the kitchen, they were called the fastest kitchen crew, even faster than their whole summer crew. So they're fast in the kitchen. So if you need dishes washed, just hit up some of these people. They also did our team did a lot of things that we weren't necessarily expecting. We did a game one night where they had to swim out in their clothes and grab, different things. Then they had to roll around in the sun, then the sands, and they had to crawl through the mud. Then they had to recite the Lord's Prayer. Then they had to start a fire and cook a breakfast sandwich. Makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? So they had to do all of that. Wasn't necessarily expecting that, but they were willing. They did an awesome job doing that. They had great attitudes. They worked well together. And one of the things that we really emphasize is from 1 Corinthians 10:31, and you're familiar with this verse probably, but it says, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God." And that was one of the verses that we came back to and really reminded ourselves of. And the fact is, we didn't know what we were going to do half the time. Sometimes we did, but that idea that as we're doing work, rather than just going into autopilot and getting the work done, the job done, we wanted to be consciously thinking about, how can I do this to God's glory? And I fall into that often. I can just start doing dishes or helping make a trail, and I just do the work. I don't even really think about what I'm doing, but I want to do it to God's glory. And I think that really is what service is, that we are doing things for God, but we're wanting to do it for his glory, for his honor. And again, our team did a fantastic job. So a couple of things that I want to just ask them, and 2 questions. We'll have everyone answer the first question, then we'll go back and have you answer the second question. But the first question was, what was one of your favorite parts about the trip that we went on? So we'll start with Brogan.
We did a Bible study, like, close to the end of the trip, and we talked about a lot of fun things and dug into God's Word. And just us there as a group, that has got to be one of my favorite parts about the trip.
And, I would probably say the Bible study too, but I also had another thing. It was one time when we were at lunch, it was like the SAW team, us, and the SWAT team, like we were sitting together at one table, and it was really cool.
I think my favorite part of this whole trip was making a lot of new friendships with the SWAT team members, because it was cool to meet them and kind of get to know them a little bit while working.
So I work with SAG, cleaning bathrooms, toilets, everything. And in Camp Tadmor, everywhere you wanna go, you have to go up here. And I don't know where we came with this idea, but we came up with calling our tummies Pablito. So Pablito eventually got hungry, sometimes. And they served us well. The food was excellent, and I give them a thumbs up.
My favorite part of the trip probably was just being around everyone and serving and just having a good time.
I just remember, before I forget, I imagine some of you maybe know some of our students, but in case you don't, okay, this is Brogan and Jessica Cummins. They're the children of Dan and Bonnie Cummins. We have Zach Doyle, Angel Torres, and AJ Hendricks. See in the picture, that was our full team. Not everyone was able to be here today. We have a couple who are actually on their way down to Santa Cruz. They got there actually last night for another camp that they're at this week. A couple were on trips and different things, so not everyone was able to be here. But that's the remainder of our team. But there's a lot of favorite things, and we don't have time for the rest of the service. But I really encourage you, talk to some of them. They can share a little bit more of those inside jokes that are pretty funny that happen when you're with someone at a week's time. But they did a great job. My second question, so that was, what was one of your favorite parts? Second question is, how did God impact you from this trip?
The thing that really impacted me on this trip was I learned in the devotionals, the week devotionals we had, that God doesn't need our help at Tadmor. It's really why we're doing it is it's really helps us and our relationship with Him more than anything else. That's what He had laid out in my heart this week.
For me, it was, let's see. So God showed me that we can serve God anywhere, no matter if it's at home, at Camp Tadmor, at church, or anywhere.
While I was there at Camp Tadmor, I feel like God taught me a lot of like patience and how to be patient, because a lot of the times we would, in the dish room specifically, we would get more stuff to do when we thought it was going to be done, and there was just going to be more stuff and more stuff, and so He really taught me how to be patient and get through all the work.
Well, I feel like God has taught me that the reward comes from Him. That if we work, we can serve Him through serving others, and that's what we did. We I remember digging and like making a trail up in the mountain, and I was just hot, not refreshed. No, I was eventually I was hungry, and it was and I just remember just thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm not helping myself. Now, a lot of people aren't really gonna come up here, but I just feel like I was using what God skills that God has gave me, and through that I was serving Him. Yeah.
Okay, how God impacted me was just when it got really hard in work times, to just be positive and just know that we're there to serve Him and others and not ourselves.
Like I said, these guys did a fantastic job. I was very, very proud of them, and it really was a great trip. And I think each of us took away from that time a little bit more. What does that really mean to serve? And I'm gonna pray for you guys in just a sec. But my prayer really is often that we, anytime you come back from a camp type experience, it's easy to just go back into routine. It's easy to get back to what you're used to. And the fact is, just like you said, Jessica, we can serve God wherever and whenever we're at. And that's what we want to do. So I want to pray for us that we would continue that momentum of focusing where we need to focus at and really serving those around us. So let me pray for us. God, I thank you so much for this past week, the experience that we were able to have. I thank you for Camp Tadmore and different ministries like that really focus on sharing the gospel and discipling students. And that's such a great and needed ministry. I thank you that we were able to have a part in allowing that to function well. And God, I would pray, Lord, for the work you've started in our heart, as you promised in Philippians, Lord, that you would continue that work. You continue to shape us and continue to refine us and help us to understand what does that really mean to serve. Thank you for what you've taught us to this point, and pray you would continue to work in us. God, I thank you for everyone who was on our SAW team and how hard they worked for what you did in their life, and the lessons you taught them, would you continue to do that. We love you, Jesus, and we pray that in your name. Amen. All right, thank you, guys. You can head on down. Good job. So like I was saying, that's one opportunity we had, and we're excited for further opportunities like that in the future. I'm going to ask Chris and Karen Cornwell if you could come up front. Like I said, Chris and Karen, I think, felt called to this a while ago, but starting in March is when they flew over to Zambia and arrived back kind of that first week in May. And again, I'm excited. I've heard tidbits of their time over there, but I'm excited just to hear what did that look like, how did that impact them, and what did that time look like for them. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to you guys. So.
Hopefully I'll get this right. Mutozi Shwani. And that means hello, good morning, or how are you in Lozi. And that is one of the main languages in Zambia. So I don't know why I'm nervous, but anyway, I am. First, I just want to read something, and this is in Luke, and it's in 10, and it says, usually keep glasses on top of my head. The Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit. And these were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his field. Now go, and remember that I am sending you out as lambs among wolves. And I'll get to that bit later. So, 6 years ago, Dan and Regina Bumstead started Love's Door for All Nations. And they bought property along the Zambezi River in a little village called Zinganga, and they started an orphan home there for they can house 12 orphans at a time, and it's 1 hour outside of Livingston, Zambia. And within that 6 years, Chris and I have been giving them advice, being advisors on agriculture and what they could grow and how they could grow, and sending them seed and having them try things out. And also within that time, we've been praying that the Lord would allow us to go, because it's a little hard to be here in the United States and try and give them advice over in Livingston, Zambia, when we haven't been there. We haven't seen the place. We don't know what it's like. And so finally, I would say probably last September or so, we started feeling the little thoughts like, well, Lord, is it time? Is it time? What do you think? And so through your generous support and support from our old church that we had, Toledo Christian Fellowship, we were able to go in March. And thankfully, the Lord allowed Chris to have 2 months off of his work. And so we went March 9th. Well, it ended up being March 10th, because by the time we got to the airport in Portland, our flight had been canceled. So we quickly had to scramble. Our daughter was dropping us off. We had no vehicle, so it's like, take us to a hotel. We've got to get somewhere where we can spend the night. And so anyway, we did end up going on March 10th. And we arrived in Livingston, and our adventure began. So basically what we were doing over there was to go see the village, find out what kind of agriculture things that we could go and teach. We weren't going over there to do a job for them. We were going over to teach the children, people in the village, people that work right there on the Love's Door compound, and to instruct them on good ways to go. So I'm going to actually, Bonnie, I'm going to have you back up. Oh, is that the first one? Because I'm going to have Chris talk about our slides. Another thing, I also had the privilege to help teach the children on that Saturday morning. They have about 30 plus children that come from all different villages around. Some have to walk hours to get there, but they come and they're tutored in school the first part of the morning, and the next part of the morning they have their Bible lessons. And so I, of course, gave a Bible lesson on one of those Saturdays, and it was the parable of the sower, and and that was a lot of fun. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Make sure you turn that on, and we'll show you our slides for our time in Zambia.
Okay. We also just want to say thank you for the awesome opportunity to make this trip, because First Baptist of Newport here was just really generous in giving to us, and your prayers and support are much appreciated. We were able to be generous while we were there with plants and different love gifts and things, because we had more than enough. So it was awesome. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Bonnie. Okay, so we arrived in Livingston, and we had about a week to get done with jet lag, because it is a horrible bunch of flights, I tell you. It's flying to the other side of the world, and we ended up somewhere in Eastern Mediterranean country, and then, Dubai. And then we ended up down in South Africa, and then, anyway, it took us a good 3 days to get over the jet lag. But the team, we went to join a team of Christian workers. There was a team of 5 already in place there for Love's Door, and I didn't get pictures of them, but we all went out for the first time to the village, and you can see the church that Love's Door had built there in the main picture. And that's the church where all the tutoring takes place, the teaching. Shayna is our daughter. She went with us, and she is still there right now, so she's staying for a good long time. We don't know when she's coming back. She's loving it over there.
As the Lord leads.
Yeah, so she's still tutoring and teaching every week there in the village. Next one. And so Karen and I's main responsibility was Dan and Regina Bumstead, who are the directors of Love's Door, really wanted us just to focus on the gardens because they wanted profitable and productive gardens for the children's home and for also the Love's Door staff, and possibly even to make money for the ministry, selling in town and selling around the villages. And this is what we were greeted with to begin with. We had heard there was some work going on and some stuff happening ahead of time, but it just, it lacked just a real focus, and so it's like, that was overwhelming to us. There's just a couple maize plants poking up in between
That's supposed to be corn. Yeah, maize.
And the soil looked really dry and just worn out, and so that was kind of a little depressing for us when we first started, but we'll show you how the Lord kind of helped us in that too. So next one. Oh yeah, so this is the gate garden. The one you just saw before is called the Mama's Garden. That's near the children's home, where the house mamas can go and harvest all the crops, and so as you can tell, they weren't eating out of those gardens. They were pretty much relying on what we would call masa flour. It's a flour product made out of corn
mealy
that Love's Door provides them from town. But that's not a very full meal deal for those kids and the villagers, and so we were really focused on finding ways to just improve the different crops that they could get. And so this was just nothing but weeds there, and big grasshoppers hopping all over the place, and so that wasn't very encouraging. There were a few plants there, but so basically they just weren't relying on the gardens much at all. Everything was having to come out of the Love's Door budget to buy food for the people, and so we needed a better balanced system. So next one, Lonnie. Okay, so Karen and Shayna were awesome in this. They just said, okay, so the big gardens are just overwhelming right now. We can't even look at those right now. It's just like, what in the world do you have us here for, Lord? We don't know what to do with just a bunch of weeds and poor soil. We're only here for 2 months, and so Karen, I think, spoke up and said, okay, let's start small. So we found this little beautiful garden area, and nobody else really is like there instructing us. It's like we've got to figure it out. It's like we're there, we're the garden experts, let them go. So we just started clearing weeds in this small area which had a little bit of shade. And believe me, in Africa, with the sun that they get there and the heat, you need a little bit of shade wherever you want to grow things, because anything out in the open sun is just going to get fried generally. So we cleared this little garden spot, and it made room for our nursery, which was going to be on this lower picture. It was going to be a small tree nursery, and where we were going to start our seeds. And then you can go to the next one. So we also had a water faucet right nearby. So they get their water from a big, smelly diesel generator pump that you have to get started, and it pulls water and it fills a big 1,000-gallon tank, which is up on a structure.
the Zambezi River.
Yeah, right out of the river, because we're right along the river there, and so there's been a few improvements, and then you can't quite see it, but in the background there's a sand filter, so the water that we would drink would be filtered, river water filtered through the sand filter, and it does a pretty good job. It still can taste not great, but we never really got too sick, I guess so. So anyway, we started on the first trip. Just a bunch of boys came over and started helping us put seeds in pots. It was really encouraging and awesome. They were eager to help. So next one. And then the following week, they have a great tractor over there. A man from Michigan, I believe, contributed this beautiful tractor to Love's Door a few years ago. And when I first walked up to look at it, I looked and there was rust, and there's plants growing in between it, and it's like, has this tractor been used? And they said, well, yeah, we've taken it and driven it around a few times, but they weren't using the tractor because nobody really knew how to, and
But it hadn't been used for years either.
yeah, nobody had ever hooked up this rototiller to it, and so there wasn't any attachments hooked up to it, and luckily I had quite a few years where I used to play with tractors on the OSU farm several years ago, and so it's like, hey, this will be fun. So me and a bunch of guys got together, and we got the rototiller on there, and we just started tilling all the weeds under. I mean, it's too overwhelming to try to get out there and hand weed, and so this ended up being a huge encouragement to those people that are on the grounds there too. 4 guys mainly take care of the gardens there, and once they saw this bare dirt, it's like, hey, we're ready to go. We're going to plant something, you know. But when it's just all weeds, it's just overwhelming for everybody. Nobody wants to do anything. So anyway, go ahead. And then Karen and I had methods that we had learned from Echo and also just our past agricultural use of raised beds, you know, that we wanted to teach them. And we were also giving training sessions every week. We would get together with the 4 guys, Austin, Stanley, Wanza, well, 3 guys. Anyway, it seemed like there was more people around than that, but 3 main guys take care of the grounds and the gardening. And so we wanted to use the plastic mulch in combination with drip irrigation, and you can't see from these photos very good, but there's 2 irrigation lines that run down the plant rows, and just to provide constant water for the plants and some shade, moisture control and temperature control, and it just was a lot of fun setting this up. But they did most of the hard work. Karen and I did 1 row at raking and hoeing, and our hands were blisters already, so they did a lot of work. So go ahead. And then Karen got into the mulching like crazy, because we had learned in Africa mulch is extremely important, less so around here, but in Africa you have the hot sun, it's going to steal all your moisture, and and the mulch really helps. It saves moisture, it keeps it cooler, the plant roots grow deeper, it helps with weed control. Anyway, so, and we had lots of it, because there's the guys, there's about 6 guys out with weed whackers, or I don't know what you call them, but they swing them back and forth, and the grass just goes flying everywhere over the whole grounds, which is about 3 acres. And so we just started gathering all that up once it could dry in the sun, and
I also want to put in, Chris, when he was talking about weekly training sessions, they actually would sit down in the church, and we were going through a book called Let's Restore Our Land, which talks a lot about Africa and the way that they need to garden from the way they had been taught, which is a European method, which just does not work there. And so, of course, mulching and composting and having shade in your garden is imperative. And so that's what we were teaching, and so that's why we were showing the different mulching methods as well.
And the fence that you see there is what's called a living fence, and it's actually pretty important to get those fences to grow up around the sides, not only for wind control, which the wind can really blow through there, but also there's cows that just wander around, and if they see a whole bunch of green, wonderful, yummy plants on the other side, they'll just break down that fence to get in. So,
And they had many times.
yeah. Seemed like every time we looked out there were cows looking and staring in there. So, anyway, go ahead. Okay, so here's Wanza and Stanley. They're working on transplanting rape, which they call it rape. It's rapa, or it's just one of the many brassica or broccoli relatives that they love there in Africa, in Zambia, because they use it in their main dish, which is shima, and they cut it up, chop it up, and use it as a relish with their dish, and they just love the taste of it, and so they like to plant lots of it, and they also like cabbage and tomatoes a lot, and onions. And so we were trying to be mostly focused on what they wanted to eat, because this is going to be their garden. And so, and this was training them in methods, but also learning a heck of a lot ourselves. So here they're making use of the drip irrigation that runs along that bed. We didn't have enough plastic mulch for all the beds, but just the drip irrigation does a large benefit, and that's hooked up to a faucet in the middle. You can kind of see there that is also tied into the big tank. So it's much easier gardening than we had expected to find, but there was a lot of improvement still that needed to be made. So go ahead. So we had to add to their water system because they had one hose coming out of there that they hand watered every plant, and it's like, okay, we got to make this easier, because if somebody forgets, or you know what it's like with trying to hand water things. I mean, at some point you're not going to get it done, and plants are going to die. So it's a lot easier to turn the drip irrigation on, or the soaker hose or whatever it is, and let it kind of keep things watered for a couple hours. And then this other slide here actually has to do with First Baptist Church, because these are all brand new orchard that we're putting in of fruit trees, and those trees were purchased basically from the money that we were blessed with from First Baptist. So Karen and I we found a nursery that sold great fruit trees, mangoes, and I can't even remember.
Okay, Mexican apple, mangoes, guava, papaya, avocados,
just anything we thought
citrus,
would possibly work there. Yeah, we had some sweet orange, some lemons, and they were so encouraged. We had taken quite a long time to plot out the perfect piece of property that got just a little bit of shade, but had pretty good soil, because the soil was very boggy on most of the property. We'd get very muddy in the wet season, and the water just stands. This happened to be pretty sandy soil here. So times of teaching. There's Karen. She's doing a teaching with everybody. That's the parable of the sower, I guess, that you're talking about. And then I'm teaching the guys that out of that book, Let's Restore watching new growth. So we had transplants thanks to Mwanza, who is in the red shirt right here. He's the main gardening guy. He's young, but his father is a professional farmer, and he learned a lot from his father, and so I don't take credit for any of that. He had a lot of knowledge, and as soon as we started teaching about mulching and composting and some of these kind of things, he just took to it, which is quite rare because Africans in general don't like mulch because it's messy. It's on the soil surface. In fact, Karen would laugh because every morning the ladies would come from the village and would sweep the dirt because
So
there
it's
was
not laughing, but
little leaves, and it's like they like things so clean. It's amazing that they work so hard to get it so clean. So
and that dirt is like cement because they sweep it every day. The whole grounds. But another reason they don't like mulch is because they're afraid of snakes, because snakes can, hide under mulch. But even a little can go a long way. And you will notice that a lot of the mulch not only is over the plants, but it's in the plant rows where you walk, and that's just to retain moisture so that ground right there does not turn back to cement. And another thing about trees that were purchased from blessings from you were also trees that we planted in the garden. We planted moringa trees so that they will grow. They grow quite quickly, and it will help shade the garden.
a little bit of shade, the leaves drop down, they're nitrogen. Yeah, a lot of good things. Go ahead. So growth in plants and people. There's Mwanza getting trained on the tractor. We weren't going to leave until he knew what he was doing with that thing. So he had so much fun. He came to me and said, Papa Chris, I would like to learn tractor. And so there's a few people that they don't need to learn that. And it's like, yes, they do. We're not going to be here for very long, and there's things that need to be done. So anyway, and there's Shayna doing training with the teenage girls, I think it is, young women. And then there's the church building with quite a few people there. Go ahead. I'm talking too much, so as usual, my time's despairing. So learning new things. I'm sure Karen has washed laundry in a bathtub before, but I threw that picture in there because I thought it was something new about this experience anyway.
I'll tell you what I learned. I learned that I am so thankful for a washer and a dryer.
Yeah. And then the other is vermiculture, vermicomposting with worms. It's one of the large hotels in the area, and this guy's a pro. He knows exactly what he's doing.
That's Lawrence.
Yeah, in all of the bins, there's like thousands of worms, and all the leftover food that comes out of the kitchens of the hotel get broken down by the worms, and they make a worm tea, compost tea. And then they take that, it's a liquid that, if you could see, there's a tap at the bottom of each of those, and they just harvest that liquid and put it on all their plants, and it keeps all the plants of the hotel grounds just looking beautiful. So
We were completely blown away because Chris and I this was at the Royal Livingston Hotel. It's big and white, it's old, it's like 5-10 star place, but they have beautiful rose gardens and different things, and we just happened to be going there this one day, and we were looking around, and Lawrence kind of says he saw us enjoying things, and he said, well, come here, because he had this big building. It wasn't really that big, but a building, and it was the vermiculture building, and Chris and I must have spent over an hour there. It was the best vermiculture we have seen, seriously, bar none. And he had it down pat. Not only do they use scraps of food compost, and this bin where on the bottom slide, some of that is food compost sitting on what it's kind of white, and that is shreds of paper. They take, like from their office, they'll take shreds of paper um, and they'll soak it in water, and that's another thing that the worms help to break down. So they're
It's
using
recycling too.
all kinds of things there, and we were just so impressed. And
So we were trying to talk Love's Door staff into doing this, and they
Having
still might there
Yeah.
at the village just get this in action.
we told them they needed a field trip there.
Go ahead, Bonnie. So hanging out with people is one of the most important things, because people are where it's at, and these kids are so full of joy, and the rest of the staff. I know you can't see the pictures too well, but these are some of the kids. That's one of the mamas standing there. She lives with the children in the children's house. Beautiful Christian lady named Florence. And anyway, go ahead. I guess I don't have time for everything. Sometimes just relaxing. That's the view out of the back of that church building, out over the Zambezi River there. And when it's 95 degrees and about 90% humidity, sometimes you just need to drink some water and stay in the shade too. So go ahead, Bud. You've seen God's grace. Yeah. I mean, we can go there, we can plant, we can try to use our limited knowledge, but the Lord is who gives growth in these things, and His creation was just amazing there with the animals.
The upper left corner, that is a picture that Shayna sent to us after we had already been home. That's the little tiny small garden that we had started with when we needed to eat an elephant, so it was just one small bite at a time, and that was that's what came up. So that was really encouraging at
Pretty
first.
much just the staff garden. We planted things that they could harvest, and quickly. It's close to the staff house, and just to act as an encouragement too. Go ahead. So joy and laughter. We got a lot of that. There's a lot of kids around, and like we hear so many people say, that they don't live fancy. They barely have enough. They have one, maybe two sets of clothes, but they have a smile on their face all the time, and they're just laughing and joyful. So just being around them is a huge encouragement. Fun and adventure, yes. That was part at Victoria Falls. We went on a quick hike to Victoria Falls, and that's just a beautiful area if you ever get into that place. It's just amazing. And then these guys fish out of the boat like that. It's a hand-carved canoe that they hollow out, and then they catch little tiny fish and just eat them whole. All the big fish are fished out, I think. So got to know some precious people. More pictures on the Singanga village base here. So that's pretty much a wrap up. We had a wonderful experience. That's Karen and Josephine, a Swedish intern that was there when we were there. She's was a wonderful help. She's now home back to Sweden, and that zebra just was hilarious because he thinks he's a car there parked in the parking
He is standing
spot.
perfectly in a parking spot. That was the day we went to the Royal Livingston and looked at the vermiculture.
Got it shady there. So then the one more. Oh, so these are some pictures that our daughter sent to us last month of everything growing. So the Lord has just continued to bless our small efforts, and the guys, just the whole thoughts of not us going to do it all, but just to go and train and to teach and encourage the guys who already have knowledge, but it's just helping them understand how the Lord has put all this together so that it can work perfectly in a natural system. Was just a real fun process. So, and then I don't know if you want to try to go ahead and run that video, or are we about out of time? I think people.
It's not too long.
About 3
Okay.
minutes. it's just a note from Dan. Dan Bumstead, the director of Love's Door, and he's just giving an update about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, of what the gardens are looking like. So let's see if that works. We were planting all sorts of weird things when we were there, so